They say we live in the most advanced age humanity has ever seen. We can simulate the birth of stars in laboratory chambers, map distant galaxies with instruments aboard satellites we engineered from metal, mine from the Earth itself, and communicate instantly with someone on the opposite side of the planet using invisible waves flowing through the electromagnetic spectrum. And yet, in this golden era of connectivity, many people quietly carry a strange feeling they can't quite name. Not sadness, not confusion, but a kind of ancient homesickness. As though they've woken up in the wrong time, wearing the wrong body, speaking the wrong language of a civilization that doesn't quite resonate with their internal compass. They move through this modern world, surrounded by screens and algorithms, while their minds drift to distant lands, to eras they've never lived in, and to questions too old to be taught in schools. What kind of paradox is this, that in a world with so much information, so many feel misunderstood, that with billions of people in reach, so many feel isolated, alien, and quietly out of place? If you've ever sat in a crowded room and felt like the only one there who was elsewhere, then maybe, just maybe, you've glimpsed the whisper of something deeper within you. A subtle sense that your soul has a history the body does not remember. And here's where the story gets interesting. Because if you felt that, you're not alone. Throughout cultures, epochs, and belief systems, there's a recurring concept. Some souls are older than others, not in years, but in lifetimes. Not in facts memorized, but in wisdom absorbed through experience. These souls, often called old souls, aren't better, but they are different. They look at the world through a lens that doesn't just see what is, but what could be and what has been. Now, I'm a scientist, and scientists don't chase fairy tales. But we do pay attention to patterns, especially those that persist across time, cultures, and disciplines. Dolores Cannon, a pioneer in past life regression, cataloged thousands of cases where individuals reported vivid experiences of past lives, shared knowledge beyond their education, and described worlds that defied the scope of modern understanding. These weren't hallucinations. They were consistent, intelligent, emotionally grounded recollections. Some were healers, some were warriors, some were philosophers, artists, or caretakers of forgotten civilizations. And what they shared was not their profession, but their depth, their quiet knowing, their sense of mission that transcended the everyday. So let's not get tangled in whether these stories are metaphysical truths or psychological phenomena. Let's focus on what they reveal. That some people walk this earth not as tourists in this life, but as veterans of many. They are not always loud, but their presence is felt. They don't boast about knowing everything, but they listen with the kind of silence that makes others want to speak. They often feel the weight of the world, not because they are weak, but because they've carried it before. And maybe you felt it too, a longing for meaning, a pull toward ancient knowledge, a strange comfort in solitude, an intuitive sense of things before they happen, an ache for a home you can't quite name. These aren't signs of delusion. These might be signs of memory, not memory of your brain, but of your being. And the universe, if it does anything well, it recycles. Matter becomes star, becomes dust, becomes planet, becomes you. Who's to say experience isn't recycled too? So if you see these signs, don't dismiss them. Don't rush to label them. Just consider this. Perhaps your soul is old, not because it's worn down, but because it's luminous lit by the wisdom of many lifetimes, burning quietly with the kind of light that needs no spotlight. And maybe you're here now, in this time of rapid change and chaos, because old souls are needed most when the world forgets what truly matters. Maybe you're not lost. Maybe you've just remembered too much. Let's take a closer look not at definitions, but at characteristics. Not as a checklist, but as a cosmic reflection. If you've ever felt a profound sense of purposa gravitational pull within your chest, drawing you towards something greater than your own story, then that's not just poetic sentiment. That's a signature, a frequency, a vector in the geometry of your soul's orbit. Old souls often carry this sense, not because they seek greatness, but because they remember responsibility. They remember the cost of silence in the face of injustice, the importance of wisdom over noise, the quiet heroism of simply showing up again and again to serve something bigger than the self. And this doesn't always manifest in grand gestures. Sometimes it's a school teacher who sees the spark in a child no one else noticed. Sometimes it's the friend who answers the late night call with nothing but patience. Sometimes it's the artist who paints things that language can't describe. Their sense of purpose isn't tied to titles or applause. It's written in how they move through the world, with deliberate care and wide-eyed curiosity. If you've ever felt that your time here is meant for something more than consumption and distraction, you might be orbiting that same trajectory. There's also a hungeran old soul, hunger not for food, not for entertainment, but for understanding. Not just answers, but questions. Old souls are insatiably curious. They're the ones who stay up at night wondering why we exist, how consciousness emerges from matter, why suffering seems so intrinsic to growth. They are seekers, and in the modern world, that trait can feel exhausting because we've built a civilization obsessed with comfort, while many old souls are driven by challenge. They crave complexity, not because they want difficulty, but because they sense that depth is where truth resides. They read ancient texts not out of nostalgia, but because somewhere in those old lines, there's something familiar, something remembered. Now let's talk about empathy. Not sympathy, the kind you write in a card, but the raw, visceral ability to feel another person's storm as if it were your own. In a biological sense, it's mirror neurons. In a cosmic sense, it's entanglement. The idea that once particles have interacted, they remain connected across space and time. So what if empathy is not just emotional intelligence, but a form of soul entanglement? What if your ability to feel so deeply isn't a flaw, but evidence of your soul's expansive network intertwined across lifetimes, wired into the collective heart of humanity? Old souls feel the world intensely because they are, in many ways, fused with it. But this kind of sensitivity doesn't always feel like a gift. In fact, many old souls report feeling overwhelmed, misunderstood, or emotionally drained. That's because they weren't built for speed, they were built for depth. In a world that celebrates the fast and shallow, the deep and slow can feel alien. But don't let that fool you. Depth is what roots the tallest trees. The oldest stars are the ones that burn most steadily. If you've ever wondered why you feel so much for people you've just met, or why injustice in a place you've never been brings tears to your eyes, remember this. Your empathy isn't weakness. It's wisdom echoing from 1,000 lifetimes of interconnected being. Now, intuition. That quiet voice that whispers long before logic catches up. Neuroscientists are starting to map it recognizing patterns the conscious mind misses. But old souls don't need brain scans to know that intuition is real. They've lived by it. They've made choices not because they made sense, but because they felt right. And later, sometimes years later, the logic catches up. That's not luck. That's legacy. A legacy of decision-making carved from countless experiences stored not in the cortex, but in the soul's memory. So if you find yourself guided by a strange Nwanga compass, you didn't install trust it. The universe is less random than it seems. Even dark matter, that invisible scaffolding of the cosmos, has a structure. Why shouldn't the inexplicable have architecture? Then there's that peculiar sensation of feeling out of place or not in the room you're standing in, but in the century you're living in. You might look around at social trends, cultural values, even the conversations that dominate daily life, and wonder if you've missed a memoir, perhaps arrived early to a conversation humanity hasn't yet matured enough to have. You observe others chasing fame as if it were oxygen, clinging to certainty as if doubt were a disease, and you ask yourself, is it me? But what if it isn't a flaw in your programming, but a feature of your design? What if feeling out of place is a cosmic breadcrumb, nudging you to realize that your soul's blueprint was drafted in a different age, maybe even a different dimension of understanding? Old souls often find modern culture too loud, too fast, too shallow, not because they're snobs, but because their internal clock ticks to a deeper rhythm. One, not measured by quarterly goals or scrolling feeds, but by moments of meaning. Their conversations crave substance. Their relationships demand depth. Their energy gravitates toward authenticity, like gravity pulling stardust into form. So if you've ever felt like the odd one out, not because you lack intelligence, but because you carry too much of it in emotional form, perhaps the universe encoded that misfit status into your soul on purpose. Not to isolate you, but to awaken you. Because systems don't evolve from the center, they evolve from the edge. And if we peer even deeper, past the social dissonance and into the subconscious, we find one of the most striking signs of all, dreams that don't belong to this lifetime. Moments that arise not from imagination, but from somewhere else entirely. Perhaps it's a vivid memory of walking through a city you've never visited, speaking a language you never learned, mourning people you've never met. Perhaps it's a recurring dream so persistent it feels like deja vu on loop. Neuroscience might call it cryptomnesia. But what if it's something more? What if, as Dolores Cannon's research suggests, these are not mere tricks of the mind, but echoes of experience stored in the field of consciousness itself, like static on a cosmic signal, waiting to be tuned in by the right receiver? The universe doesn't waste energy. It recycles it, it folds it, layers it, stores it. A supernova that exploded billions of years ago seeded the carbon now beating in your heart, so why not memory? Why not awareness? Perhaps your soul, like a neutron star, is dense with history's compressed timelines coiled tightly inside your being, waiting for the right pressure to release their light. And then comes the trait that perhaps defines the old soul more than any other: resilience. Not blind toughness, not bravado, but a quiet, unshakable core. The kind that doesn't break when the world falls apart, but bends and absorbs and endures. Old souls understand that adversity isn't the enemy, it's the catalyst. They've weathered storms in forms we can't measure, and each hardship in this life awakens something ancient in them, a knowing that pain, though brutal, is often a teacher disguised in shadow. So when the world hurts in it, will they grieve? But they don't collapse. They bend inward, consult the silence, and rise with a little more wisdom than before. If you've ever faced darkness and come out with more empathy instead of bitterness, more compassion instead of fear, then that's not luck, that's lineage. A soul's muscle memory, trained across epochs of learning, kicking in just when the world needs it most. And somewhere along this journey, another sign begins to surface. Not always dramatic, not always easy to explain, but unmistakably powerful. Moments of transcendence. A sudden sense of unity with the cosmos. A flash of insight during quiet reflection. A stillness that settles in while watching the stars, as if the entire universe has paused to whisper, "You are part of this." These are not hallucinations. They are moments of alignment when the vibration of your consciousness briefly matches that of the universe. It's like resonance in physics. When two frequencies line up, even the smallest force can produce a profound effect. Old souls have more of these moments, not because they chase them, but because their soul remembers the frequency. They've been tuning to that station for lifetimes. You may not talk about it openly. You may even doubt it yourself. But the experience is real, subjectively real. And sometimes real in a way more important than the physical. It's the recognition that you're not separate from the universe, but a node within it. That consciousness is not locked inside your skull, but flows like a current, touching everything. And in that realization comes peace, not the kind sold in mindfulness apps, but the kind that reorients your entire view of existence. A peace born not of ignorance, but of integration. And what does that kind of vision do to your relationship with time? Everything. Old souls tend to perceive time differently, not as a straight line with a start and end, but as a kind of spatial dimension. Something that bends, loops, stretches, just as Einstein taught us that space and time are woven into a fabric that can curve, ripple, and fold. Perhaps consciousness, too, is not bound to a single timeline. Perhaps that's why some people sense the past like it's still happening, or the future as if it's already knocking. Perhaps your ability to feel time as nonlinear is not confusion, but clarity. You're not lost in time, you're just standing outside the narrow frame most people are trapped within. And in that broader view, life takes on a new meaning. Suffering isn't just misfortune, it becomes curriculum. Joy isn't just pleasure, it becomes recognition. Conflict isn't just chaos, it becomes contrast. Because when you know the soul is older than the story it's living, every page becomes a lesson, every scene a chance to evolve. And so you start living differently, not just reacting, but responding, not just consuming, but creating, not just surviving, but contributing. Which leads us to the final and perhaps most vital trait of the old soul, the relentless drive for spiritual growth. And I don't mean crystals or rituals, although those can have their place. I mean the hunger to become more conscious, more ethical, more aligned with truth. Old souls are not content with appearances. They want essence. They want to know what love really means beyond romance, what freedom truly requires beyond slogans, what existence demands beyond comfort. And this pursuit isn't always easy. It often leads to loss, to solitude, to shedding identities that no longer fit, but it also leads to illumination, because the light at the end of the tunnel was never somewhere else. It was always you recognizing yourself again after centuries of forgetting. So if you find yourself asking deeper questions, then the world seems ready to answer. If you feel called to understand, to heal, to serve, to witness the invisible architecture beneath everyday life. If you sense that your soul is not just old, but timeless, then welcome, not to a club, not to a label, but to a realization. You are not strange. You are necessary. You are not out of place. You are ahead of time. You are not alone. You are among countless others, waking up quietly across the planet, ready to carry the wisdom of lifetimes into a world that desperately needs remembering. Because if you really are an old soul, then your existence here is not an accident. The universe doesn't waste energy on redundancy. Evolution, whether of species or spirit, moves with purpose, with direction, even if the trajectory isn't always linear. And so here you are in the 21st century, born into a world caught between chaos and clarity, between misinformation and awakening, between extinction and evolution. That timing is not incidental. It is strategic. If old souls truly carry the wisdom of many lives, then what better time to be born than now when wisdom is in short supply? You are here because this moment needs you. Your depth, your calm, your refusal to settle for easy answers. You are here to remind the world what it has forgotten, that compassion is not weakness, that science and spirit are not enemies, that truth isn't a weapon but a light. In a culture trained to sprint, your presence teaches patience. In a society obsessed with novelty, your memory brings context. In a civilization that shouts, you are the quiet voice that still makes people turn their heads and listen. But being an old soul doesn't mean retreating into isolation or hiding behind insight. It means engagement. Not in all things, but in the right things. You don't need to argue with the noise. You need to amplify the signal. Be the person who listens when others interrupt. Be the thinker who pauses before reacting. Be the bridge between data and meaning, between knowledge and wisdom. Your presence, when grounded in integrity, is not neutral. It shifts the environment around you, like gravity, unseen yet undeniable, pulling things into new orbits with nothing more than its being. And that's not just poetic metaphor, it's physics. Massive objects curve space-time. So do massive presences curve emotional space. When you walk into a room with intention, with presence, with peace, you change the field. People feel safer, minds open, fear loses volume. That is not coincidence. That is resonance. So here's the challenge and the invitation. If you recognize yourself in these words, not just the signs, but the trajectory, then live accordingly. Don't shrink. Don't self-censor to fit into molds built for newer souls still learning their way. Don't water yourself down for fear of being too deep, too sensitive, too intense. The world has enough shallow. What it needs now desperately is depth. Live like your soul has been here before and is here now for a reason. Act like your choices ripple beyond this lifetime. Love as if every interaction plants a seed in a garden you may never see, but others will walk through. Study not just facts, but meaning. Teach not just lessons, but presence. And above all, remember who you are, what you carry, and why you're here. Because if you see these signs, if you've heard your own soul echo in these words, then you're not alone. You're not broken. You're not lost. You are a keeper of the long memory, a steward of ancient light, and your time is not coming. It's now, because when you awaken to the truth that your soul carries the accumulated stardust of lifetimes, you can no longer live as if you're just passing through. You begin to realize that your life is not a test but a contribution, not a mistake but a message, not a reaction to the world but a response embedded within it. And in that moment of realization, the pressure to figure it all out fades. Because old souls don't need all the answers. What they need is alignment. Alignment between what they know deep inside and how they move through the outside world. And so the journey becomes one of coherence, of bringing the eternal into the ordinary, of walking through a supermarket with the same reverence you bring to meditation, of speaking to strangers with the quiet confidence that you might have met before in a different story in a different sky. This isn't fantasy. It's physics of the soul. In a multiverse of probability and interconnected systems, consciousness may be far more non-local than we ever imagined. And perhaps what we call an old soul is simply a consciousness less bound by linear identity, more free to roam the archives of collective experience. But even with this profound depth comes responsibility. Because knowing you're an old soul doesn't exempt you from the human experience. It doesn't give you a shortcut through grief or a fast pass through confusion. In fact, it often brings more of both. Why? Because old souls signed up for complexity, for challenge, for contrast. They come not to escape the world, but to engage it, metabolize its pain into compassion, its chaos into clarity, its division into deeper understanding. And what a time you've chosen to come back. A time when humanity teeters on thresholds psychological, ethical, technological. A time when knowledge accelerates faster than wisdom, when noise drowns out silence, when division threatens to become default. This is not a mistake. This is the mission. The old souls of this era are not just mystics and monks. They are scientists in labs, teachers in classrooms, parents in kitchens, artists on sidewalks, thinkers in solitude. They are hidden in plain sight often, tired, often quiet, but always listening for the signal beneath the static. So if you're still wondering what you're here to do, perhaps you're asking the wrong question. Maybe it's not about doing more, but being more. More present, more awake, more whole, because in a fragmented world, wholeness is radical. In a world addicted to stimulation, stillness is revolutionary. And in a world confused by complexity, simplicity grounded in timeless wisdom becomes the most advanced technology of all. You don't need a platform to matter. You don't need credentials to carry wisdom. You don't need permission to embody peace. Every time you choose compassion over judgment, presence over distraction, curiosity over fear, you alter the equation. Not in theory, but in real neurobiology, in real emotional fields, in real quantum interactions. The ripple effect is not metaphorical, it's measurable. So, live like a tuning fork, not to echo the noise of your environment, but to hold a frequency high enough that others remember their own song. Speak not to convince, but to awaken. Listen not to respond, but to remember. And walk not to arrive, but to embody the journey itself. Because if you are an old soul, you've walked before. But this time is different. This time, you are not here just to observe. You are here to participate fully, fiercely, gently. With your eyes open and your heart intact, let your wisdom be humble. Let your presence be bold. Let your journey be sacred, not in a mystical sense, but in the tangible daily reality that how you live matters. Because one day, long from now, another soul will feel the same strange ache you once felt. They will wonder why they feel older than their years. They will stumble upon signs and whispers, and they will remember. And when they do, they will find something maybe, something you built, something you wrote, something you said, or simply the energy you left behind. And they'll feel it, that someone else walked this path before them, that they were not alone, that you were here.